Daxon Muir hated quiet that pretended to be silence. Real silence was honest, airless, star-cold, the kind you got when a hull breach took your breath and the vacuum took the rest. The cutter's silver parallax coasted with thrusters dead and lights trimmed, drifting along a vein of darkness that threaded through the Emmerich cloud like a crack in reality. "Nothing's pinging back," said Kellen Price from the nav cradle. His voice came through Daxon's headset with a granular edge the parallax's filters couldn't sand away. Active sweep goes fuzzy at 200 meters. Sev Malric, their engineer and part-time philosopher, tapped the side of his console with the base of a spanner. "That's not fuzz, that's phase lag. The filament is bending our returns out of sequence." "Scan for life?" Kellen asked. Daxon shook his head, even though no one could see it. "Only if we see a biosphere or samples. This is a highway cut through physics, not a habitat." He toggled the external cameras. The filament was a line of absolute midnight against the dusty shimmer of the nebula, a negative cut with hairline sparks winking along its edges. His knuckles had that particular ache they always got before a good decision that would look like a bad one. "Bring us 10 meters deeper." The parallax obeyed like a well-trained dog with an attitude problem. Daxon had bought her for cheap from a bankruptcy yard at Port Asterion, then ripped out everything that wasn't stubborn or necessary. She wasn't pretty, but she could skate across ice so thin it didn't know it was water. They slid inside the filament's shadow. The ship's ambient hum dimmed. Even their breathing, shared on the loop, sounded paper-thin. "There," Sev said, pointing with the spanner as if the cameras could follow the gesture. "An object at the filament's locus. Geometry reads, 'Not human. Not anyone we've catalogued.'" Daxon widened the feed. It hung like a wind chime designed by a mathematician, a cage of slender rings intersecting at irrational angles, suspended around a dark core that refused illumination. No heat, no emissions, just gravity behaving like a polite drunk, leaning a little the wrong way. Whistle. "If that's a mine, it's the prettiest death I've ever seen." The target's not radiating, but it's drinking. The ambient RF is quieter near it, like it's eating noise. Let's ask it a question, passive first, then a whisper ping. The whisper ping came apart like snow in warm air. Their passives mapped absence. Then, on the cusp of turning back, the object answered them not with light or sound, but with a shape Daxon felt on the pressure points of his teeth. "Welcome," said the voice without a voice. "Bring your quiet." Kellen sucked in air. "Is that in my head or in the loop?" "Both," said Sev, eyes bright now. Engineers lived for machinery that told them it was smarter than it looked. That's elegant. "Hands off the broadcast," Daxon said. His palm rested on the manual thrusters. He didn't like devices that talked in plural imperatives. "We're not pushing anything until it asks nice." They held station. The object rotated imperceptibly. A microsheen of frost formed along the parallax's forward viewports, then sublimated with a sound like a sigh. "You carry noise," said the not voice. Curiosity threaded through the shape of its thought. Loss, promise, heat. "Guilty on all counts," Daxon said. "You got a name we can break our tongues on?" A pause long enough for regret. Then, "We are the Aedolon. We harvest entropy debt." Sev's mouth made the shape of an idea. "An entropy sink, if it can trade chaos for order." "It can put broken things back together," Kellen finished. He rarely sounded reverent. He did now. Daxon allowed himself a rub of the jaw. And it wants our quiet, meaning what exactly? The not voice reshaped again. You humans carry residuals, memory heat, risk heat. Your stories leak. We filter. You gain scaffold. Stories, Daxon echoed. Sev's fingers danced across his console. If it's what I think, it can bind probability slosh by ingesting emotional gradients. That would explain the vestibular coupling. It's asking for payment, Daxon said, in feelings. Kellen laughed once sharply. We should have brought a poet. We brought you, Daxon said. Close enough. The parallax drifted closer until the rings of the Aedolon filled the viewport, their edges picking up the nebula's amber where the filament allowed light to graze. Daxon's hand hovered over the forward RCS. If we do this, we do it on my clock. One toe in, no heroics. Copy, Sev said, lines of code cascading. I can build a loop to pillow the coupling. If it goes sideways, cut power hard and we'll slingshot out on residual momentum. Deaths that start with words like pillow the coupling never are poetic, Kellen muttered. Daxon took them in. The change hit like a wind from a direction that didn't exist. Daxon heard the clatter of some memory he'd dropped years ago, the rattle of a nacho tray in an orbital stadium on Earth the day a striker missed wide, and the crowd screamed like a single throat. He felt the skin-tight suit he'd worn on his first extravehicular time. He smelled ox grease from Port Asterion's market. The Aedolon took it all, not violently, but with a practiced efficiency, like a gloved hand lifting dust from a mantle. A corridor opened inside the cage. Visualizing geometry now, Sev said, voice small. It's growing a topological isthmus keyed to our perception of inside. Then we go, Daxon said. Kellen, you're on the tether. Sev, you're my shadow. They locked scoot harnesses and pushed off, crossing through a boundary that should have cut them in half and didn't. The corridor wasn't there, and then it was, a tunnel of cognitive edges. Daxon kept his eyes on the markers his suit projected and on the small, tough men that he brought, because small, tough men survived long odds by deciding they already had. Something ahead, Kellen said. Mass signature light but coherent, like a cocoon. They braked. The cocoon turned as if turning was a concept that had just occurred to it. Within, a shape knelt, hunched over, limbs too long, skin with the iridescent mat of insect wings seen at dusk. It looked up. The face wasn't built for human empathy, but the eyes knew how to plead. Daxon felt the Aedolon's attention tighten, a pressure like sea depth. Observe. This form owes debt. It burst a thread. We hold until balance. Sev's whisper fit the tunnel like it had always been there. It trapped someone. A traveler paid the toll wrong. The being spoke. Their suits rendered the sounds into something they could bear. Release me. The machine's accounting is old. I will settle my own debts. What's your name? Daxon asked. I am Tusek Halvar of the Veldrix. We map shortcuts other species will not take. Smugglers, Kellen's eyes narrowed behind his visor. Cartographers, Tusek said evenly. We accept you will confuse the two. Daxon stoped the cocoon. The seam lines weren't mechanical. They were narrative. Points where cause and effect had been stitched with the thinnest thread. He imagined a thread breaking, someone's choice, a wrong sequence, a dare taken one step too far, and the Aedolon cradling the offender, not out of malice, but out of maintenance. Fix the ledger, balance the heat. How long, Daxon asked the air. How long to pay down? The Aedolon considered. Longer than you understand. Shorter if you bring more quiet.
Kellen touched his wrist. Dax, we could leave, mark the spot, come back with a proper survey.
Daxon thought of how many proper surveys turned into tomb markers. He'd made a life out of not leaving people in places designed to forget them. "Sev," he said, "build me a frame." "You want to counterfeit a pattern?" Sev asked, startled and delighted. "I can scaffold a synthetic residual, feed it stories we can afford to lose." "Not stories," Daxon said. "Noise. The kind we carry so it doesn't have to. My father's warnings I don't need anymore. The habit of flinching at doors. The taste of a victory that keeps me from trying another." Kellen swallowed. "That's a lot, Dax." "It's junk I shouldn't be hauling," Daxon said, and found the smile he'd learned after his second bad year. "If the machine eats noise, I've got pantry stock." Sev's fingers became a blur. "Frame ready. It'll hurt." "I've been hurt by worse and for less," Daxon said, and reached with his tether hand and touched the cocoon where the seam's logic ran thinnest. "Tsek Halvar of the Veldrix, do you consent to being the kind of problem humans like to solve?" The alien's second eyelids shuttered and opened. "Yes." Sev fired the frame. Pain came like a season change at the speed of thought, a rake across old grooves he'd mistaken for himself. Daxon felt the clutch of doors and the loud alone of 6 months between contracts and the last time he'd lied to a friend about being fine. The Aedolon drank, the cocoon seam lit with a color that wasn't on any map. Kellen's hand was on Daxon's shoulder now, grounding. "You're here, Dax. You're here." The seam unzipped. Tech unfolded, taller than he'd seemed, balancing easily in the corridor's indifferent gravity. He bowed, an angle that must have meant something in a culture Daxon would never know. "Your debt is mine." "No," Daxon said, through the last of the ache. "It's paid." The corridor shuttered in approval, or in completion. The Aedolon's rings thrummed, and for heartbeat the filament sang with a sound like a stadium remembering the same goal. "Balance," the knot voice said. "Warmer now. Bring what you will. Take what you have bought." Daxon nodded. "We'll bring something better than noise next time." He glanced at Tsek. "You want to ride to a station where the docking clamps don't ask questions?" "You're Port Asterion," Tsek said, tasting the words. "I know it. Yes." They withdrew along the isthmus, Tsek in tow, the parallax waiting like a dog at a door it knew would open. The filaments quiet, softened by a measure. The nebula poured color in their wake, as if the universe were relieved someone had paid attention. As they cleared the shadow, Kellen let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "We just traded a handful of ghosts for a map through the impossible." "Careful," Sev said, already cataloging. "Call it that, and the price goes up." Daxon eased the cutter onto a vector that would curve them back toward known space. The ache in his chest wasn't ache anymore. It felt like room. Some things are worth the premium. Behind them, the Aedolon rotated a degree into a geometry only it understood. The filament stitched itself closed, one thread at a time, neat as a well-mended seam, leaving only the whisper of a place where noise could be eaten and debts could be balanced, if you were brave enough to count what you carried and let go. "Log it," Daxon said. "Name the bookmark Gloam Filament, and put a note on the registry." "What kind of note?" "The kind that says humans paid in stories. It worked."